Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. I recently did a $14 grocery haul for a week's worth of meals, so that's 21 meals. And today I've got some game-changing recipes that I'll be making from this haul. And these are game-changing not just because of how they taste, but because of what they mean for your budget and your ability to feed yourself and your family on a minimal grocery budget. So let's get right into the video. I only have a few pieces of this red onion left over, but I'm going to use it to make an all-purpose base gravy masala that can be used in several different recipes. This is an Indian dish, and I've taken some inspiration from a creator that makes Indian food, and she has a channel called Curries with Bumby. I've been watching her food and just kind of drooling over it for months now, so today I thought now is my time to try to make one of her recipes. And it seems like most of the Indian chefs that I saw did prefer to use red onions in their cooking. They said that they were stronger, and that was just their preference. So it did work out that these are the type of onion that I happen to have in my haul this week. And you're supposed to cut these very fine. I think it would have been easier probably just to throw these into the food processor. So if you want to do that, go ahead and do that. In the original recipe, she had a lot more of the red onion than I do. So if you're making this recipe at home and you do have more of the onion, then obviously go ahead and use that. I think that this is a huge flavor component of this gravy masala. And I think I've already gotten so much use out of this red onion. It's just such a great flavor enhancer. But we're also going to be using some garlic and ginger. And I don't have enough ginger either. But when has that ever stopped me from making a recipe? It's always good anyway. It might just be a little bit better if you had all of the ingredients, but it's still going to be good. And I'm only using a couple of cloves of garlic. I'm like for something else I want to do. However, use as much garlic as you want. And then you're going to cut this really fine. Again, she kind of had hers into a paste. Almost a paste. So if you want to add all of these to the food processor, that's probably best. Same thing with the ginger, but I'm just going to do a real fine chop here. And again, this is a seasoning base. So the more of it that you make, obviously the more meals that you can season it with. So I've got everything cut up and ready to go. And then here are some of the spices that I'm going to be using. I'm starting out with 1 teaspoon of turmeric. Then I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of cumin powder. And the recipe calls for 1 tablespoon of Kashmiri chili powder, which is a vibrant red Indian chili. However, I don't have that, and it's my understanding that paprika is the best swap out because Kashmiri chili gives it a beautiful red color and a rich flavor without being too hot and spicy. And so I think the mild paprika is going to be a nice swap out. And I'm only going to use a half tablespoon. I can always add more later on. And I'll be using 1 tablespoon of coriander powder. If you're not familiar with this spice, it's actually made from the dried seeds of the cilantro plant, and then they grind those seeds into a fine powder. It has a bright citrusy flavor, very similar to cilantro. There are lots of layering of spices in Indian cooking, and my next ingredient is just another example of that. I'll be using this garam masala spice blend. I fell in love with this a couple years ago, and if I had one word to describe it, it would just be lovely, because that's what I think of when I think of this aroma and this flavor. It's warm, soothing, not overbearing, but just comforting and lovely. This is a spice blend that has coriander, cumin, black pepper, cardamom, and cinnamon. So if you don't have it in your pantry, you could always add in some of the spices that you do have. And I got this little tool at H Mart probably a year ago, I think, and I just love it so much. It's so pretty, and I like to use it for a few different things, but it's perfect for spices. So I'm just going to mix this up, and then we're going to do something unique with this spice blend in that we're going to go ahead and add some water to this, and make it a wet blend. But before I do that, I'm going to give it a taste because if you remember, I only added about half of the paprika. So I want to taste it and see what I think, whether I should add another half tablespoon in there. This tastes very mild to me in terms of heat level, and I want to keep it that way. So I think I'll just leave it as is, and then maybe next time I'll experiment a little bit more. Actually, I'd like to pick up the cashmere chili just because I'm so curious about that flavor and how it compares to our red chili pepper that we use here in the States, or even how it compares directly to paprika. So I added some water here. I think she said to use 1/3 cup, but I don't think I used the full amount. Otherwise, it would have been quite thin. So I just stopped when I thought it looked at the right consistency. And then we're going to set this aside. We're going to use this and add to it to get as much flavor as we want. And I have 1.5 tomatoes left, so I'm going to use 1 tomato in this recipe, and it needs to be cut up quite fine, or you can also do this in the food processor. I thought I would use my grater, however this tomato is so old it's just not grating very well, so I switched up and decided to chop it into super fine pieces. And if you're new to my channel, I did just want to say that I frequently make recipes where I don't have all of the ingredients. I believe that recipes are just a suggestion of how to make a meal. I think that you can go ahead and just sub out ingredients and you can use whatever amount that you want, and it generally comes out very, very well. That being said, if you don't have all of these ingredients, feel free to substitute, or maybe if you don't have some of the spices, just leave them out. Use what you do have. I'm going to go ahead and put the full regular recipe for you in the description area of my video so that you can make this the way it was meant to be made instead of making it the way I'm making it. Okay, I added 1 bay leaf and 1 cinnamon stick. I have no idea if these cinnamon sticks are supposed to be smaller. Hers did look a little bit smaller, but this is the first time I'm using a cinnamon stick in cooking this way. I don't think I've ever added it to the oil. And then I'm using cumin seeds. Here you're noticing we're layering again because I used cumin powder earlier in the paste that we made. And I've been wanting to try using cumin seeds for a long time. Again, if you don't have it, just don't add it here because you're going to have that cumin flavor in the paste that we have. Most people generally have the cumin powder, I would say, but cumin seeds maybe, maybe not. And then I'm adding my onions. I was a little bit concerned about whether the cumin seeds were going to burn because they did turn darker. However, I was watching lots of people cooking these and they did seem to cook them, kind of high like this where it was sizzling. So I'm assuming it's not too much of a worry, but it was just something I was thinking of my first time trying this. So I thought I would mention it in case you were thinking of it as well. And as it turned out, there was nothing that tasted burnt in here at all. And then I'm going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And then I'll be tasting this at the end, and we can add a little more salt at that time if it's needed. And here we're just adding in that spice blend that we just made. This smells so amazing. This is very satisfying to my senses to make, and I am so hungry that this is really just getting me excited for dinner. So I let that cook together for a bit, and then I added the garlic and ginger. And then the last thing I need to do is pick out the cinnamon stick and the bay leaves. And I added a small amount of water just to loosen this up a bit. And this is our finished product. It's our base gravy masala, and we'll be using this to season our dishes. And you may be wondering what masala means. It's basically just any of a number of spice mixtures ground into a paste or powder for Indian cooking. And since I have these 2 bags of chickpeas, I thought it would be a great time to use one of the bags and make chickpea masala. And I'm going to add some water to this. Some of my chickpeas are still frozen, so I'll make sure and bring that up to a good temperature, and then I'll add in some of my masala mix. And it took me some adjusting to get the right mixture of liquid to spice, but I did get this perfect in the end. I added just a bit of oil and a little bit more salt because I did taste this and it needed more salt. And I gave it one more taste test and this is perfect. So I'm going to let that simmer and I'm going to go ahead and make some thick flatbread. It's like a thick tortilla, kind of like a chapati, which I've made before. Chapati normally has whole wheat flour and also regular flour, half and half. But I just used 1 cup of flour, 1 teaspoon of salt, and then about 2 tablespoons of oil. And then I'm just going to add some hot water here. Basically, it's the same way I make tortillas. I've also made flatbreads with this same recipe. It depends on how thick you want the bread to be for whatever application that you're using. And for a minute, I forgot that I was having my recipe, so I added just a little bit too much water, which is fine. In this case, just add a touch more flour in, and then that will fix that. I'm going to knead this for just a few minutes, and then I'm going to set this aside, and this will need to rest for about 30 minutes. And that allows everything to come together. Specifically, it allows the gluten to fully hydrate, and it just results in a better flatbread. You can feel in your hand how much softer this dough is after you've let it rest. It just feels so soft and fluffy. And then I'm just going to roll this out, and I'm planning to have 1 small flatbread and 1 larger one. And I looked everywhere for my roller. I was down on my hands and knees digging through the cupboards. I have no idea where I put it. Okay, you can see that this is much thicker than a regular tortilla, which is exactly what I want because I want to tear this into pieces and then use this to dip up some of my chana masala. And so I want it to be heartier. And for this one, I'm going to add a little bit more oil to my pan because I would like the texture a little bit crispier on this one. And then for this large one, I'll make it soft. And I think this is done. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to use this for a fajita with the lentils and the red pepper, or if I just want to use this the same way with another curry mix that I might make. So I'm just going to set that aside. And since I'm being so extra on this dish, I decided to go all the way, and I'm going to make some garlic oil to brush on my flatbread. So I just chopped up 1 clove of garlic. I'm going to put the other tortilla into the fridge and save that for my next dinner. And then, of course, I was in such a hurry and had so many things going on that I got this a little browner than I would like. But that's okay. I'm just going to go ahead and strain it. And then I'll just use the garlic infused oil. And I am so hungry, and this looks and smells so good to me. I'm just going to tear this up into pieces so I can use this while I'm eating, and then I'll brush it with the oil. And just a little more extra color. Gosh, I've been babying this cilantro for the last 2 weeks. This looks to be about 2 servings, maybe 1.5, but I'm just going to eat it right out of the pan, and then whatever I don't eat, I'll put into a container for my lunch tomorrow. And I think that this is one of the best chickpea masalas I've ever had, if not the best. I love everything about this. It is mild, but yet it has plenty of flavor, and I love the consistency of it. There's a perfect balance between the amount of liquid in there and the amount of chickpeas, and this one is just perfect. Sometimes I feel like chana masalas can be a little too rich, but the cilantro and the flatbread really helped to balance this out, and I cleaned my plate. This was so good. I ate it all. I loved using that masala base mix. I am definitely looking forward to making my next meal with that. I knew going into this haul that I would want to make at least a few soups with our ingredients. Obviously, if you wanted to keep it to a super easy menu, you could just make 7 days worth of soups, and you would have plenty of ingredients for that. But anyway, today I'm just making about 2 servings. I've already made 2 servings from the ingredients. I've got lentils and all of the vegetables that you saw. I'm going to start out with oil. So when you're cooking with whole foods, there's really not a lot of calories in whole foods. So oil does play an important part here as an added fat, and it also boosts the caloric intake. I tend to add more or less oil in the soup depending on what else I'm bringing to eat along with the soup. And you could always make a flatbread to go with this. I just use the garlic and ginger as a seasoning base, and I'm not using any kind of bouillon here because it's plenty flavorful enough with just the garlic and the ginger and the dry spices that I'm going to add. I added some salt and some turmeric and some basil, and I don't measure these because this is just a soup that I literally make daily. And today I added some onion into this, some onion granules. I don't usually add this to my soup, but I saw this in the cupboard and decided to add a small amount. And then I usually do layer my garlic with fresh and with a little bit of the powder. And then I let my lentils cook for a little while, and then I add in my vegetables. And the reason I do that is I do like my veggies to be kind of colorful. I'm actually planning to take this for my lunch today. And so I add half of the veggies in now and then half in about 10 more minutes. And I find that by the time I eat it, they still have a little color to them. Look how fast I'm boiling this. This is indicative of my life in the morning. I'm always kind of in a rush. I think I do probably more cooking than most people, but it does save me a lot of money. And then I tested that and it was perfect. Okay, I do keep this garlic bread in the freezer. This is not part of the haul, but I just wanted to share this because it's a super inexpensive way to make a delicious add-on to soup. And I do realize we are just about out of soup season, so we won't be eating soup anymore. However, we have had some cool days here on the coast of California, so I've been making sure to get my fill of soup. And I've got maybe a half a serving left over. As someone that just cooks for one person, I love being able to have that frozen garlic bread that I can just pull out and use whenever I want. It's not just a great addition to soup, it's also a great addition to pasta meals and some other dishes where it just, you don't have quite enough, but it just helps to make it complete. And then I always take this hot sauce, and then I've got this nutritional yeast that I like to add in that just makes it extra creamy. And I'll pack this garlic toast up as well. And I decided to use the masala gravy base again, this time with some chickpeas and frozen vegetables. And for this one, I just cooked some garlic and added some turmeric and a little garam masala. Then I added in that delicious seasoning base that I had made earlier in the week, along with some water and my frozen vegetables and the rest of my chickpeas. I added some salt and pepper to this and then plated it with the cilantro the same way I did last time. This made such a fast weeknight meal. I was able to put this together in about 15 minutes. It tasted so good. I actually think I like this better than the chickpea masala that I made before. And I loved that dish. But something about having this mix of chickpeas and vegetables just really did it for me. I thought I would eat this along with the little flatbread that I made earlier, but it was so well balanced that I found that I didn't need that at all. So I put that back in the fridge. I loved it so much that I went back into my kitchen the next day and I made a big batch of this base gravy masala. And I ended up freezing it and putting it into these ice cubes so that I could make super fast weeknight meals with my chickpeas and frozen vegetables in the future. And this is one of those recipes where you could feed a family of 4 for about $2. So I definitely think this recipe is a keeper if you're on a tight budget. And for my next meal, I was tired, it was late, and I just decided to throw all of these items into my little mini dash. I had enough rice left over to make a pot of this, and I think I have more than enough lentils. In fact, I'll probably only use about a third of those lentils. I was actually planning on grilling this zucchini for a bowl that I was going to make, but I changed my mind because it's not looking that great. Been in water for at least a couple weeks now. So I just chopped it up and I thought I would throw that into this mixture. And I was afraid of how to calculate the water. So I decided to cook the lentils for a few minutes first. And I know that for basmati rice, I'm going to have equal parts rice and water. So that was how much rice I had left. And here are all of my ingredients. Remember last time I made a similar dish and I told myself I wanted to cut that pepper into larger pieces. So that's what I did here. And of course I did rinse my rice very good. And this time I decided just to use a little bit of the adobo seasoning that I made a few weeks ago. And I just kind of eyeballed how much on the lentils that I thought I would like to add. And the lentils here are adding lots of fiber and protein. And then of course we're getting lots of nutrients in these other vegetables. I really enjoyed that last dish that I made in this mini dash. So I was kind of excited to try another one that was similar. And I was a little bit concerned that I was going to have enough moisture for this rice. So I just wanted to make sure that every piece of rice was kind of covered in that liquid. And I'm actually surprised my tomato lasted me that long. It was a little dried out, but all in all, I think that this worked out pretty well. Okay, so then I cooked this for about 25 minutes and I came back and this is what it looked like. It's a beautiful dish. I love the way everything cooks together in this and the rice just turns out perfectly. I wanted to stir this up because if you remember, I had some garlic in here as well, and I just wanted to make sure that all of these seasonings were blended. And then I topped this with the cilantro and the green onions. And this was delicious. The lentils just kind of seamlessly blend into this dish and you don't even really notice that they're there. But I love the fact that they're upping the nutrition in this. And I will say that I did like the chickpea dish that I made a little bit better. And I think it's because I added in some of that vegetable seasoning blend. And I like that more than I like only adding in the adobo seasoning because it had more depth of flavor in the other dish that I made. Also, I added in some additional seasonings to that. Okay, here was another meal that I made with my leftovers. I just fried up that flatbread and had a fried egg with some lentils around. And that's the first time actually that I've used lentils in that way. Usually I'll use pintos or black beans for that. And then to break the richness of this dish, I added some green onions and sriracha. Another meal I had was with the leftovers from the night before, and then I just fried up some of these tortillas to give it a little more heartiness because I didn't feel like this was enough for me for a dinner. Okay, here's what's left over. I have a small amount of lentils. I have about a third of the bag of mixed vegetables and a third of the bag of California style vegetable mix. And I've got some cilantro. I never used the jalapeno, so I should probably just remove that from the budget. And I also never used the tomato paste, which I was planning to use at least one serving out of that tomato paste. I think I have 1 cup of flour left. I was planning on 1 pound of flour, which I think is about 3.5 cups. And I think I've only used about 2, but I could be a little off. And then I've got some garlic and then a piece of the onion and a small amount of zucchini. I know that I could make 2 meals out of this. I could use the flour and I could make one of those soups with dumplings, with vegetables and dumplings like I made about a couple months ago. Or I could make some empanadas, or I could make a little pot pie. I started doing this haul by the idea of pricing out items from bulk. And that's basically like the staples like flour and the chickpeas and lentils and things like that. So I ended up getting 20 meals. I could have made an extra 2, so 22 meals plus 1 loaf of carrot bread, and that came out to be about 64 cents per meal, plus you would have some leftover carrot bread for snacking. Obviously, buying in bulk is the way to go. You do save quite a bit of money buying that way. And I love the fact that I was able to get some of these recipes off of my bucket list that I wanted to try, and I did it all for $14. I can't tell you how many times I've wanted to try a recipe and I go to the store and just the ingredients are like $24 or something like that, and then you're just like, geez, I could have eaten out for this. So I like it when I'm spending less money and still able to try a lot of the recipes that I want. And I also discovered some that are going to be keepers, like this sinigang Filipino rice, which was really good. And then making this first meal in my mini dash, I learned just how easy and efficient it is to make dinner in this thing. And I will link this for you in case you want to get one of these for yourself. I added lots of different spices and some of that better than bouillon vegetable seasoning, which made that so delicious. And I loved learning that I could make my own mayo out of chickpea broth, and also discovering that I could make a hot dog, which again wasn't the texture of a hot dog, but I still love this nonetheless. And I made enough for 8 of these, and I counted a serving size as 2 of these because that is typically what I would eat for my dinner. And I do hope that you guys enjoyed watching this little mini series as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did like it, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't, or consider sharing my video with someone you know. It does help my channel. And a big thank you to all of my supporters, both here on the channel and on Patreon. Thank you so much. You guys mean the world to me. I appreciate your support. I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you next Sunday.
Morning has broken, my windows are open. Wanna feel the wind blow through my hair. Which way do I follow? What happens tomorrow? I turn to you and hope you can guide the way. Sometimes I give up, just want